Question number 4. Today we are attacking question number 4. Hey everybody, I'm Aaron from Speaking 26, where I show pharmacists how to get their 26 on speaking by showing how I got 30 on speaking. Today we have question number 4. Paulina, are you ready for 20 seconds to prepare?
Yes.
Okay. You have 20 seconds to prepare. You may begin preparing now. Time. You now have 60 seconds to give your answer. You may begin speaking now.
The professor talks about kinds of loads that engineer must consider when building a structure. So the loads can be static and dynamic. Static load is something that doesn't change. They can be dead or alive. Dead will be something like walls, ceiling, floors. It's easy to calculate because they're straightforward and don't change. Live loads will be something like people, furniture, cars. They're static, they move around, and it's harder to calculate. For example, people in a room, when there's family standing in one side of the room, and then someone said that there's something outside the window, so that people all run to the window. That's an example. Dynamic loads change abruptly. For example, hurricane. Was it time?
Yes, if you want to continue, you can finish.
So, hurricane or a strong gust of wind, the building must withstand those forces, and the engineer must take it into consideration.
Okay, good. I'll finish my notes here. Must withstand those forces. Okay. What do you want to say about your answer? And then I'll talk about the notes.
There were moments when I didn't understand what the lecturer is talking about, but I kept speaking and try to pretend like I know what's going on.
Okay. Yes, this
it was difficult to understand what are they talking about.
Yes, question number 4s are complicated, complex. There are many things to listen to. It is difficult to understand what the professor is talking about. I like that you said you continued to keep talking, even though you didn't have a full 100% crazy strong grasp on it. You still kept saying what you could about it. You still kept saying, revealing important information. So let's talk about what I heard.
Honestly, I don't even know what loads in English is. I need to look it up.
Yeah, it's talking about like the weight. So for example, people in a building, how many are cars on a bridge? The weight, how big of a weight, how much of a load can that bridge withstand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll think about it as overall weight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so number 1, I like that you established that there are 2 types of loads that an engineer must consider. Number 1, static. Number 2, dynamic. Number 1 here on my notes. Good. And then I also liked number 2 on my notes here, does not change. You were talking about static. You said it's easy for an engineer to calculate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like here when you talked about live loads, in parentheses, I put static because you did reestablish that even though you said live loads, you're still talking about static loads. I like that you explicitly said that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was listening to the difficult lecture, the complicated lecture, there were a total, dead loads, live loads. Well, we have to focus on number 1, static, and number 2, dynamic. So it gets complicated when there's talking about different loads. I like that you said this is still a part of static loads.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 3 here is where we have room for improvement. Number 3 and number 4 is where I'm going to help you get 26. So I put quote, you said harder to calculate, but from the lecture,
They say something else about it.
they say something else. They say that even though people will move in a room, for example, everybody moves to the window side of a room to look at the northern lights,
Mhm.
it it's still a predictable calculation for the engineer. The lecturer said, for example, an engineer still knows that no matter what, only 100 people can fit in that room. So they are prepared for 100 people to be looking out the window.
Mhm.
Okay, so how do we make this improvement in the future to get your 26 on speaking? When we're taking notes, when we're listening to the lecture in question number 4, our notes are going to be organized. So this note, I would branch off into a tree of 2
That's
branches.
what I did, if you can see.
All right, excellent. Yes, I can see. Okay. Okay. So
So
then what happened here? Something happened when we were taking the notes. Something happened. We heard something wrong, or it's easy to do because we're taking in
so
so much
that
information.
live loads, and when that moment where it's the professor was talking about live loads, and after he gave example of people, cars, there was further explanation of it that I got confused in,
Okay.
and it wasn't and it was clear, but I didn't get it from the first
Okay.
time. But then when the professor continued talking about dynamic loads, I got it. I think I got whole the explanation of dynamic loads, but that specific moment, for some reason, I don't know, I got confused in it and missed some information.
Okay. I'm
So
glad you shared that.
that the
Yeah.
family, they were in one part of the room, then they all went to see the northern lights, and I'm not sure what happened after that.
Okay. Yes, and I'm glad you shared that because that is an interesting part of the question that on purpose gives us perhaps more information that we need, perhaps makes it more challenging by
Mhm.
design. So after class, after the live stream, you and I can go back and look at that if you'd like, because what I want to know is if you heard it again, would you be able?
I'm pretty sure that I will get it if I hear it multiple times, like if I listen to it again.
Okay.
But like in that moment, it was
Okay.
overwhelming.
And okay, so when it's talking about live loads, what you just said, people in the room, everybody moving to the window side of the room, or cars on a bridge, that's a very specific and complicated example within static loads. And it's showing us that even though people are moving in the room, cars are moving on the bridge, the point that he's making is that
It's
even
still
though people are
predictable.
moving, the engineer knows, well, only 100 cars can fit on this bridge. So even if they're moving, I know it's 100 cars.
Mhm.
Okay.
But with dynamic, that's something that can be completely unpredictable, like a hurricane or gas.
Tidal waves. Good. Strong gusts of winds or tidal waves. Yes, unpredictable. And so my timer stopped here. I'm not sure exactly when your answer got cut off, but
I don't think it was right when I started talking about dynamic loads. It cut off.
Okay. And that's when your answer started to pick back up its strength. Your answer became more coherent. Your topic development it gained its strength again. So you understood dynamic. Okay.
I feel like when I was listening to the lecture, I feel like if I start talking about the people in the room and how the northern light and then they all went to the window, I will not have time to fit in dynamic loads.
Correct.
I feel like I just should shorten it, and I should not talk about people running to the window. Otherwise,
Correct.
the dynamic load will not fit. But then it's like, no, I'll fit it all in. And then that was my mistake. I ran
Yeah.
out of time.
Right. Like in my answer, I can give an answer if you want, or we can move on to the other things we have planned for today. But in my answer, I don't talk about the example.
Mhm.
I do say one quick sentence about the people moving to the window example, but I don't mention the people running. I use, the only thing I take away from that is something like, in spite of people moving in the room, it's
Mhm.
still a predictable amount of weight for the
I've noticed
engineer.
in the TOEFL, they give you more information than you need in the lecture, and you have to like filter it,
Yes.
and shorten it, and like pack it so
Yes.
you have like you have to get all the information. Like you still have to keep the idea of it, but you have to shorten it in your 60 seconds.
Filter it and package it. Yes.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. That is
I
absolutely what it is.
I was trying to, I thought it's good to catch every little detail, so then the reader understands that I pay attention to details. I understand every little thing in the lecture, but then
Well,
I will run out of time. So we
right.
have to
More
work.
important than paying attention to every detail from the lecture, because as you just correctly said, there's always more information than what we need. So
Mhm.
more important than paying attention to every detail, which would just be a summary, the most important part of this question is to explain the kinds of loads, explain the kinds of loads an engineer must consider.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a reminder to Paulina and to everybody. The goal of the question, the most important part of the question for this question number 4 is to explain the different types of loads an engineer must consider. Okay, so Paulina, I'd like for you to say something about that so that we really analyze that. So a minute ago, you said, I feel like I should describe all the details from the lecture. But what do you think about that now after what I just said?
It is important to answer the question and keep the idea of it, but it's not necessary to mention every little detail of it.
Right. In fact, it's
That's
impossible
what
because
it's
of the,
called, briefly summarize. I think
oh, well, this one doesn't say briefly summarize, but I understand some of the questions do say that. And you know what I do? I disregard that. Because like you said, there's more information. First of all, some of those questions are not from the official test makers, the ones that say that. If it is, I only regard that, I only include that in my answer if I'm answering the most important part of the question. So for this one, explain the different types of loads an engineer must consider. That's my number one purpose, my number one goal when I start giving my answer. If I find it useful to summarize a part from the lecture while maintaining what the number one thing I'm doing is, explaining the different types of loads an engineer must consider. If I find it useful, then I will include that summarized information. But for example, this question number 4 lecture, the professor, did you hear when his very first sentence was, he talked about internal forces and external forces?
Mhm.
Not relevant. The rest of his lecture we didn't need to know that. So his opening sentence unnecessary information based on what the question is asking me to do, which is explain the two different types of loads that an engineer must consider.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the lecture usually is about 2-3 minutes, and we only have 60 seconds, 1 minute to talk. There is no way we can include everything from the lecture into our answer.
There's
We have
right,
to
there's no way.
filter it, and
Nor are we supposed to do that. The question does not ask us that.
Mhm.
Right. So that's the part that I'm hearing here and that I often help people with. We assume like, yes, it is a skill to be able to summarize all of the information, but the question does not say that. The question says explain the
Mhm.
two loads. It doesn't even say the two, it just says explain the loads the engineer must consider. So we know that it's two different kinds. So we're going to explain two different kinds.
Mhm.
How do I, in my mind, what I think is compare and contrast. So when I'm explaining static like you did, within that you summarized beams, walls, floors, live loads like people and cars. That's when the summary comes in, when we're establishing what one of the things is. And then when I transition to talking about the second thing, dynamic loads, when I transition to talking about the second thing, that's when I compare and contrast something like, unlike static loads, or on the other hand, dynamic loads do concern themselves with forces that change abruptly.
Mhm.
Okay, so for a question number 4, when it's telling us to explain two different things, as it often does, in my mind, the way that I'm going to do well on question number 4 is by comparing and contrasting. What ways are the two loads similar? And what ways are the two loads different? Compare and contrast.
Mhm.
Okay, do you have any, I'm going to pull up your notes again. Do you have any comments or questions? Do you want to tell me anything about your speaking answer for number 4, question number 4?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about speaking rate and fillers.
Mhm.
I didn't hear a lot of fillers from you this time. I can tell you're already improving on that.
But I could have speak faster.
You could have spoken faster.
Could have spoken faster.
Yes. The challenge with this one is I like the way that you said.
I didn't fit. I had to fit the dynamic loads, and I didn't fit it in. And one of the reasons why I didn't fit it in, because I spoke too slow.
Well,
Or
I think the reason you didn't fit it in is because they made it incredibly challenging. The example about the Northern Lights, the people moving to the window, that was a big chunk of the lecture. So it's natural for us to think we need to say something about that.
Trap, I think it was like
Did
a
you say
trap.
trap? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a, yes, it is a
Because
challenge.
they knew that students will want to talk about it, and that will lead to
Yeah, it leads to taking time away from the second thing we have to talk about, dynamic loads. It is a little bit of a trap. Yes, it's a challenge that we have to recognize because we practice questions number 4 so well, so much, and we're so good at them that we recognize, hey, that's not the two things that I have to address in my speaking answer. So Polina, what are the two things that we must address in our speaking answer for this question number 4? What are the two things? What are the two loads?
So static and dynamic.
Perfect. Static and dynamic. Yes.
That we must describe in this
Yes.
question.
Would you like to give a second answer for the same question?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would like to.
Let's do it. So I'm going to get you 30 seconds, excuse me, 20 seconds to prepare.
Okay.
Okay. You have 20 seconds to prepare. You may begin preparing now. Time. You now have 60 seconds to give your answer. You may begin speaking now.
The professor talks about types of loads. So the first type of load is static. The second one is dynamic. So static is type of forces that don't change. It can be dead or live. So dead, an example of dead ones will be walls, ceiling, floors. They're easy to calculate and they're pretty straightforward. Live loads will be something like people, furniture, constructions. They're static. They move around, but they're still predictable and they can be calculated. Dynamic loads, on the other hand, can change. It's something like hurricane, a gust of wind. An engineer must take it into consideration when project a building.
Much better. Specifically, number 2 here. This time you correctly said easy to calculate. So this time you correctly talked about this example of a static load. When we're talking about people and cars, live loads, which fall under static loads. Good, much better. How do you feel? What do you want to say about your second speaking answer?
At the beginning, I feel like I should have started faster. At the beginning, I was talking too much about unnecessary things.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up. There's one thing that we're improving our speaking rate. And what I've noticed in my answers is, like at the very beginning, when I'm using the words from the question, my speaking rate is not the same for 60 seconds. One way that you can improve your speaking rate is noticing that there are some sentences that, we do need to think more about, and we are naturally going to speak a little bit slower. They're more complicated. But some sentences, for example, my opening statement, which with what you just said is what reminded me of it, that we can say as fast as possible.
I tend to speed up at the end, but at the beginning, I'm still, I don't know.
Yeah. At the beginning, you're still getting warmed up. You're careful because you know that there are certain things you must talk about in your answer.
Mm-hmm. And then at the end, it's like, time is out. I better hurry up.
Yes.
And then,
okay, so we know that speaking rate is something we need to improve. You just said at the beginning part of your answer, you know that you, Paulina, can speak faster. So how will you do that next time? What can you do to make sure you're speaking faster at the beginning?
Just try to get to the point as soon as I can.
Perfect. You're aware of it now. So next time, you know to get to the point as quickly as you can, because you're going to want that time at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You said good. Let's remember to get to the point quicker at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And then number 3 here, talking about live loads, which still falls under static. So that's good that you just said that. Yeah, we're going to get to the first point quicker to make sure that we leave ourselves enough time for the second point, which for this question is dynamic loads. People, furniture, predictable, can be calculated. This was the part that I liked. This was the part that you said correctly. Can be calculated. Yes, even though they're live, like people are alive, moving in and out, we're live, moving in and out of buildings, on and off of bridges, it can still be calculated. It's still predictable for an engineer. Okay, so I think we just talked about, we've already addressed the number one way that you can improve from this, your second speaking answer. And I like how you said it, getting to your first point quicker. The thing that I noticed how you opened up your first sentence is a little bit of a summary. You say something like the professor talks about versus a way that helps me get into it quicker is using the exact words from the question, such as, there are two types of loads an engineer must consider when building a structure. I'm reading right now. I added about 3 words, but the rest of that sentence is reading. So when we get the question on the test, we can write that down, the most important part of the question. I'm going to say that again because this is what I often have to help people with. I have to say it, I have to share it multiple times in order to have that get through. What's the most important part of the question? As you just heard Polina and I talking about, it's not to summarize, it's not to say all the details we can. That is a skill and that would be impressive. But this question is not asking us that. It's asking us to explain 2 different types of things. On question number 4, we often get asked to explain 2 different types of things. The way that I open up quickly getting to my first point, explaining the first thing is by using the words from the question. When I got the question and I had 20 seconds to prepare, I wrote down, quote, explain the kinds of loads. So when I start speaking, beep, there are 2 types of loads that an engineer must consider. I use the words from the question, specifically the most important part of the question, to help me quickly open up my speaking answer and get to my first point quicker.
Yeah, and the question will be in front of us, which will be also helpful.
Yes, good. Yes, it's right in front of us. And then I personally like to write it down because that helps me to stay focused. I'm always focused on that. Everything I say, like I might have to come over here, I might have to summarize something, but it's for the purpose of coming back to explain the different types of loads. So I write it down so that it's whether I'm looking at the screen during the test or my notes, it's impossible for me to get sidetracked. Okay, so would you like to say anything else, ask anything else, or would you like to hear my answer? Or are you ready for our stamina improvement?
Let's hear your answer.
Okay, give me 20 seconds to prepare for this. Question number 4. You can start it whenever you're ready.
Okay. You have 20 seconds to prepare. Begin preparing now.
Explain the kinds of loads an engineer must consider. Explain the kinds of loads an engineer must consider. Two, static and dynamic. 3, weight, beams, walls, people,
Time.
cars. Okay. 60 seconds.
You have 60 seconds to speak. Begin speaking after the beep. Beep.
There are 2 kinds of loads an engineer must consider when building a structure. Number 1, dynamic loads. Number 1, static loads. Number 2, dynamic loads. Number 1, static loads. This concerns the forces that do not change, such as the beams, walls, and floors of an actual building itself. This also is concerned with people and cars. Even though people and cars move in and out of buildings and on and off of bridges, the amount of people that can fit into a room or the amount of cars that can fit on a bridge are predictable to an engineer. Therefore, it is still a static load. unlike dynamic loads, which change abruptly, and those are unpredictable, such as tidal waves and earthquakes. An engineer must consider unpredictable things like tidal waves and earthquakes when they are considering the features that make up a building so that it can withstand those forces. I'm finished. If I looked down and still I had 5 seconds, I would, okay, when I finished, how many seconds did I have left?
Like 1 or 2.
Okay, then I would have finished, I would have ended there. Paulina, is there one thing from my answer that might help you with your answers?
In general or specifically for?
Either would be good. Maybe nothing sticks out right now, and that's okay.
Something I've noticed that you didn't talk that much as I did about live and dead load, like two types of static loads.
Very good observation.
That, and nobody asked us about it to talk in details about it. The question was static and dynamic. What I did, I was precisely talking about live and dead loads, types of static loads, which was the reason why I didn't make it in time.
You didn't make it in time to what?
Like, I didn't fit in the whole lecture in my 60-second response.
Dynamic loads. You didn't, right.
Yeah. For the first time I gave a response, I did not fit it at all. The second time I gave my response, I almost fit it in, but there was some information that I left out of 60-second response. And the reason why you finished it is because you didn't talk so in details about live and dead loads.
Right, so, which fall under static.
Yeah.
Right.
You
I didn't
combine them, and you
filtered and packaged, like you said.
Yeah, it was not asked to describe type of static loads to us. It was asked to describe two types of loads, which is static and dynamic.
Very good. If I was perfect, or if we had more than 60 seconds, if we had 90 seconds, then yeah, I would have gone more specific within static, talking about dead and live. But I'm not perfect. I only have 60 seconds. Therefore, I'm going to focus all of my time, all of my thoughts on the most important part of the question. Explain the kind of loads. It says there are two main types. I don't have enough time to go into the subtypes. I have to be focused on the two most important things that I must get to within 60 seconds. So what does that mean? That means that I sacrifice talking specifically about, see, your answer in regards to just static loads might have been better than my answer. You more specifically talked about static loads. You went into the subtypes of loads, dead and live. But my 60 seconds was better because I covered dynamic loads also more thoroughly.
Yes.
So what do? I give up, I sacrifice, I let go of, I'm not going to give a perfect static answer, but I am going to address the two most important things that I must address. Filter and package. And it is like a little trap. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to see, when I get the question, when I look at the speaking question for number 4, my reading fluency is challenged. Do I recognize what the most important part, do I recognize what they're really asking me to do, which is to explain the different types of loads? Overall English fluency. Okay, very good. Any last comments or questions before we move away from question number 3, Paulina?
No.
Okay. Okay, I really liked what you said here, when we go back and watch this, it was before I gave my speaking answer. I like things you said. It's somewhere around trap, somewhere definitely including filter and packaging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so there's the note of that. We'll make sure to go back to that. Now, moving to the part of this class, which is focused on your speaking stamina. So we have to speak excellently for about 20 minutes. We are now going to move away from this question number 4 and go to a topic that you have been working on, and I've been listening to your answers. Shopping in a large store versus shopping in a small specialty store. So Paulina, in order to, number 1, improve our speaking stamina for the test, in order to speak in a more complicated way, and in order to improve our brainstorming, let's have a mini debate on large stores or small specialty stores. Which side of the debate would you like to have? I'll take the other side.
Either way will be fine, but I guess I'll choose the large store.
Large stores, okay. So that means I have the small specialty stores. Okay. Debate. And so the purposes are number 1, stamina. 2, language use. And 3, brainstorming. For example, you have 20 seconds to prepare. Okay. Okay, so let's start preparing. You can go first, or you can tell me to go first. Both are good.
I can try to go first.
Okay. Let's get that ready. Okay, so there's no time limit. There's no 20 seconds or 60 seconds here. It's just you can speak for as much as you'd comfortably like to in favor of shopping at large stores is better than small specialty stores.
Okay, so I personally prefer shopping in large stores because I'm a busy person. I don't have time to make multiple trips in different little stores to get the things that I need. I just like to go in one place and get a variety of products and be done with that. Because I'm studying for the TOEFL, I spent most of my day studying for it. If I spend time traveling to different specialty stores, I will not have time to study.
Good.
I have a few reasons. Should I continue or will we go step by step?
Your choice. I think you have good momentum going. If you'd like to continue, that'd be good. Or I can go.
Let's do step by step.
Sure, step by step. Okay.
I want to open all my cards.
Yeah, very good. All right. Okay, so I wrote down the good things you just said in blue here. Now I'm going to argue. I'm going to give my argument to what you just said in blue. So Paulina, while I am arguing, you are listening for your counter argument.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak next, it's only going to be based off of what I say. So tell me where I'm wrong or where I'm forgetting something, or even though Aaron said this, what I have to say is more important.
Okay.
All right. So Polina said she prefers large stores. Okay, I'm busy. I like going to just one place and being done with it. Time is limited. Yes, that's much more convenient, right? Supercenter stores or large malls. Okay, all right. So Polina said that she likes to just go to one place and be done with it. But the reason why I prefer small specialty stores, Polina, is because in large stores, they have general items, whereas in a small specialty store, for example, a cooking store, that's where I find the spices and ingredients that cannot be found in a large store. A small specialty store has things that are imported from places, and that's the purpose of a specialty store. They specialize in things that the larger stores don't have.
However, I remember from my experience, when you purchase things from the large stores, their return policy is much more loyal, and you can return used things. I remember I bought a skincare product and I spilled it, and I was still able to return it and bring it back. Whereas in the small specialty stores, those are usually local businesses who count every coin, and I'm sure they will not be okay returning a spice that you already opened and you didn't like how it smells. So that's why I still think that large stores are definitely better, because you don't have to worry if you bought something by mistake or bought something wrong that you want to return.
You made a strong argument talking about large stores. Yes, they often do have very customer-friendly return policies. Small specialty stores, for example, my local spices and food ingredients store where I go because I simply cannot find those things at the large store that doesn't care about niche items like that. My small local store, I have a one-on-one relationship with the owner, Mary. She's great. We don't need to have a return policy written in small font on the back of the receipt. Mary and I have a real human relationship. She'd be glad to return something for me to replace it if I found it to be low quality.
Okay, another thing that I've learned from my own personal experience going in different stores is that in those specialty stores, because the items are not very popular, they can sit there for months, and that's doubtful that they're still fresh. Whereas in the big store, people buy it all the time, and things there are more likely to be fresh. I remember I went to an Asian store, special Asian store, to look for some interesting Asian food, and everything was like a week old there, because not that many people go there, and their turnover rate of their products is very low in the small specialty stores.
I wonder if that's a small sample fallacy, because while I believe you that when you went into one store, some of their products had been sitting there for a while, most small specialty stores could not continue to run business if they did that consistently. So we might be making a small sample, which means like this is only one store that it happened to. Most small specialty stores couldn't survive as a business if they did that.
Couldn't survive the business, so they did what?
Well, if I walked into a store with the example that you just said, if Mary's spices and ingredients store had things that were sitting there past the expiration date, I wouldn't I wouldn't continue to go there. The
Uh,
business wouldn't exist because other people like you and I, we don't like that. So while I believe you that you have seen it, I don't think that most small specialty stores do that.
mhm. Well, and also back to your argument about some special products that you can only find in a small specialty store. I will not agree with that. The big stores still have a wide variety of choices. For example, I am not, I was born in Ukraine and I used to a lot of products that I couldn't find in America when I just came. But I actually went to one of the large stores not too far from where I live, and I was able to find the like expensive European facial serum that I was surprised that I found because they are European, they're not American, and I was still able to find them in a large store. So that's why I think that the choice there is pretty big and you can find different things from different countries, and it's not necessary just a narrow American choice.
Good, got it. I heard what you said. You were able to find a specialty item at a large store.
Mhm.
Okay, good. So my counter argument to that is that unlike large stores, we are able to find more specialty items at small stores and find out about even further specialty niche items. For example, when I talk to my local owner, not only am I supporting local business at the small specialty store, my community, my local neighborhood, but because we have a one-on-one human relationship, we have one-on-one human conversations where I'm able to learn about, with the example that you just said, a skincare product, taking that example or ingredients and spices, food examples from the local owner, since we're having natural friendly conversations as members of the community, I'm able to learn about, hey, Aaron, this product from this country is going to be coming in next week. Do you want me to reserve you one? This kind of customer appreciation doesn't happen in the larger stores.
Mm. Not necessarily. A lot of large stores have an app where through that app you can manage a lot of things and pre-order, and it will be delivered to your house and they will be kept in the store, and there are a lot of loyalty programs and coupons that could save you a lot of money. That's something that local specialty store won't have for sure.
All right, you win. Kicking my butt in the debate with the app. I can't argue against an app. This is 2021, We all love apps. That's pretty good. All right, so I took notes here, some things that I really liked.
CVS has that app. That's where I work.
Yeah.
I work at CVS Pharmacy. CVS had that app. I didn't think of it at the last moment when I thought, okay, Aaron, you won. And then last second, I remember that app.
Boom, brainstorming. There we go. Nice. That's exactly why we're doing this. I like how on the spot, live, you thought it like, here are some of the things that really popped that I really liked the delivery, the way when you talked about the return policy, I was like, oh my goodness, how did she think of how am I going to compete with that? I like the phrase, They don't count every coin. That was powerful. And then of course, when the app, I'm finished, I'm throwing in the towel, Paulina wins.
I was almost dead, and then the last second, I remembered of that app.
That was great. I don't even want to try to fight that. Okay. So I'm going to end this live stream, and then we can talk about how this helped you and things that you want to remember. So 1 second here, Paulina. Okay, thank you everybody for watching. For more information, check the description in the video or go to speaking26.com.